History books are often written in the ink of grand strategies and the blood of soldiers. We study the pincer movements of generals, the specifications of tanks, and the maps of retreating empires. But beneath the thunder of the front lines, there was another war being fought, one that didn't take place on a battlefield, but in the kitchens, the basements, and the psyche of the ordinary person. For the non-combatant, World War II was not a series of maneuvers, but a relentless test of endurance. It was a world where a loaf of bread was more valuable than a gold watch, where the sound of a distant engine meant a sleepless night underground, and where the very fabric of normal life was systematically dismantled. Moving away from the generals and the maps, we must look at the lived reality of the 20th century's darkest hour through the eyes of the men, women, and children who simply tried to survive it. This is the history of the Silent Front. When war broke out, the first thing to vanish was the light. Across Europe and eventually Asia, the blackout became the first great psychological burden. Governments mandated that not a single glimmer of light should be visible from a window, fearing it would serve as a beacon for bombers. In London, Berlin, and Paris, life became monochromatic. Streetlights were extinguished, car headlamps were hooded with tiny slits. For the elderly, the simple act of walking to a neighbor's house became a navigational hazard. In the UK alone, road fatalities skyrocketed during the first month of the blackout. But the routine changed in more than just lighting. The state now owned your time. In the Soviet Union, the labor force underwent a radical transformation. By 1942, over half of the industrial workers were women, performing grueling manual labor for 12 to 14 hours a day. This wasn't just work, it was total mobilization. In the UK, the Essential Work Order of 1941 meant the government could tell you exactly where to work and for how long. You couldn't quit and you couldn't be fired without state permission. The concept of the private citizen was effectively suspended for the duration. If the blackout defined the night, the ration book defined the day. Food was no longer a matter of preference, it was a matter of chemistry and state-controlled calories. The experience of hunger was not uniform. In Britain, the Ministry of Food took a scientific approach. While sugar and meat were scarce, the government ensured that even the poorest citizens had access to milk and cod liver oil. Paradoxically, the health of the British working class actually improved during the war. But move east, and the picture turns horrific. In Nazi-occupied territories, food was a weapon of racial policy. The Hunger Plan, a Nazi bureaucratic directive, explicitly aimed to starve millions of Slavs to ensure German soldiers were well fed. Nowhere was this more evident than in the siege of Leningrad. Here, the daily bread ration for a civilian dropped to just 125 grams, about the weight of a smartphone. This bread was often 50% sawdust or cellulose. When the food ran out, people turned to ersatz, or substitute goods. They boiled wallpaper to get at the potato flour paste behind it. They ate joiner's glue. They hunted for crows. In the biology of war, the human body becomes a ledger of what the state has stolen. By 1942, the home was no longer a sanctuary. It was a target. The strategy of dehousing became a recognized military objective. The logic was cold. If you destroy a worker's home, you destroy their ability to work, regardless of whether the factory is still standing. Civilians adapted by going underground. In London, the underground stations became makeshift cities. Every night, 150,000 people would descend the escalators, carrying blankets and tea thermoses. In Moscow, the metro system was even more organized, featuring libraries and even makeshift clinics within the deep-level stations. But for many, there was no safety. In Germany, as the Allied bombing intensified, the bunker became the center of social life. In Japan, the situation was even more dire. The traditional wooden houses of Tokyo were tinderboxes. During the firebombing of March 1945, the heat was so intense that the canals, where people dived to escape the flames, actually reached boiling point. For the civilian, the sky had become a source of constant existential dread. What does years of constant fear do to the human mind? Psychologists of the era noted a phenomenon called moral exhaustion. At first, there is a surge of adrenaline and patriotism, the Blitz spirit. But as the years drag on, this is replaced by a profound, heavy apathy. society began to atomize. In Germany and the Soviet Union, a culture of denunciation took root. You couldn't trust your neighbor or even your children, who were often encouraged by the state to report defeatist talk. This created a silence that sat over the dinner table, a guardedness that would take decades to wash away. There was also the shrewdness of survival. The black market was everywhere. In occupied France, the système D for débrouiller or getting by, became the national religion. To be an honest, law-abiding citizen often meant to starve. To survive, you had to become a petty criminal, bartering heirlooms for eggs or cigarettes for coal. The war didn't just break buildings, it bent the traditional moral compass of an entire generation. Perhaps the most enduring tragedy of the civilian experience was the transformation of childhood. Millions of children were evacuated, sent away on trains with luggage tags pinned to their coats, often to live with strangers who didn't want them. In the UK, while Operation Pied Piper saved lives, it caused a massive psychological rift. Anna Freud, the pioneering child psychoanalyst, observed that children were often more traumatized by the separation from their mothers than by the sound of the bombs. In the Axis powers, childhood was militarized. Education became an extension of the war machine. By 1945, German children, the so-called wolf children, were scavenging in the forests of East Prussia, orphans of a collapsed empire, living like wild animals in the ruins of the old world. These children didn't just lose their homes, they lost the very concept of a structured, safe reality. When the guns finally fell silent in 1945, the war did not end for the civilian. The world was filled with displaced persons, 11 million people in Europe alone who had no home to return to, or whose homes were now in a different country entirely. The legacy of the war lived on in the bones of the survivors. The hunger winter in the Netherlands left a biological mark on those born during that time, a higher susceptibility to disease and stunted growth that lasted a lifetime. We often remember World War II through the lens of victory and defeat. But for the hundreds of millions who never wore a uniform, the war was a period of slow, grinding endurance. It was a time when the ordinary became extraordinary, and when the simple act of staying alive was the greatest victory of all. The next time you walk through a city rebuilt from the rubble, remember the people who lived in its basements, who queued for hours for a single egg, and who kept the world turning while the sky was falling. The next time you walk through a city rebuilt from the rubble, remember the people who lived in its basements, who queued for hours for a single egg, and who kept the world turning while the sky was falling. Their story reminds us that the true cost of war is not measured in territory gained, but in the quiet, invisible scars left on the human spirit. But this raises a haunting question for us today. In an age of modern convenience, do we still possess that same level of psychological endurance, or has the silent front become a relic of a past we can no longer comprehend? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to The History Room.